are happening in our lives. That He's walking right alongside of us, and He is, especially you got the Holy Spirit, and you're not seeing Him because of what you're preoccupied with. And sometimes He'll be asking you questions, and you won't even recognize that He's asking you questions. There's a point in time when it comes to where you're ready to listen that your eyes aren't open, and He's able to reveal things to you. And, it talks about that Word burning within their hearts. And that's the thing, how hungry are we for the Word? And how much do we want it? Do we let disappointments turn us away from being hungry for the Word? And the other thing is they were like disillusioned because of Him being crucified, and all of a sudden they're rekindled. All of a sudden they see it, and they're excited again. It says like it was evening, and they were all going to get ready to go to bed, and they jumped up and they ran back to town. They ran back to Jerusalem to talk to the disciples. And that's the thing. It's like, how much zeal do we have in the situation? How far are we willing to go forward? And one of the things that I recognize in this, I've heard it said before, is that I keep cutting out here. Let me see if I can find a decent position to stand in. Sounds like this is working. Back in those times, it seems like, I don't know if just not everyone knew the Word, or somehow they missed some things, especially the disciples, because Jesus told them, I'm going to die, and I'm going to come back. And it's like they weren't listening, and they acknowledged it sometimes, but it's like they were expecting someone to come and rescue them from the Romans. They were expecting someone to pull them out of their situation. That's what they thought it meant by being saved, like, we're going to get rescued away from our oppressors. And how many times in the past were they oppressed by people? How many times? Like many times. And it's always because they were veering away from God. That was the reason they were oppressed. And, this just came to me, but in a sense, it's like when we do step away from Jesus, when we do step away from God or forget about Him, we allow ourselves to be oppressed by things of this world. We step into things that pull our attention away from Him, and then pretty soon, again, we're going to realize we're not being fulfilled, and sometimes we get drawn into addictions and things where we keep coming after it thinking, I just need more of it and I'll be okay, and it's not. And so idols are oppressors to us. They're things that hold us down. They're not going to rescue us. It's going to be Jesus. And they didn't see that. And so they were sad because they thought they were disappointed because they thought they were going to be rescued out of this because it wasn't what they expected. And we got to realize that Jesus doesn't necessarily always pull us out of situations. He helps us to persevere through them. And many times if we stick close to Him, He'll help us to triumph over those things. But it's not like just some kind of a magical teleport or pixie dust where He just all of a sudden picks you up and says, here you go, you're over here now. Sometimes there's an involvement in that, getting out of those things. But Jesus is the one who gives us peace through those situations. How often do we feel alone and not realize that He's with us? And how many of us live our lives for ourselves? That's the thing. Jesus said to pick up my yoke, to take up it, because it's easy, my burden is light. And part of that is that when we stop worrying about ourselves and we start loving others and seeking to do what's best for them, He said, love God, love your neighbor. Then when we stop worrying about everything that's happening in our lives, it takes off a huge load, because most of our problems come from what we're focused on in our lives. That's why He says, give your life to me, and I'll make you whole. He said, those who lose their lives will find it, but those who try to hold on to their lives will lose it. That's because life is temporary. But if you lose your life to Him, if you give it to Him, then He can use that life and bring fulfillment in it. It says in Genesis, it says, let us create man in our image. And part of that is because that's what we're created for. We're created to be in His image, not just a physical form of a man or a woman with 2 arms and 2 legs and a head and a torso, but in His image. That means who He is. It's His personality. It's His love. God is love, so we're meant to be loved. We're not meant to seek after love because we need love like an addiction, because we already have His love. We're meant to be His love. We're meant to personify His love to others in this world, and through that we'll receive His love in return and know it. And He's willing to give it anyways, whether or not whether or not you realize this and you step out in it, but there's fulfillment in that. And as far as when he says be fruitful and multiply, what he means is like, if you think about it, because a lot of us think we're talking about making babies. That's not actually what he's talking about, because Jesus said every tree is known by its fruit. What he's really saying is, bear my fruit and multiply my image on this earth. We're made in his image, and then he's saying to multiply that, to show more, make everyone like me. And you know, in James chapter 1 it says that he's the Father of lights. We're the lights. You know, a lot of people, some people, I've read descriptions where it's talking about saying that, oh, the Father of lights is talking about the stars and the planets. That's not what the lights are. Because we're called to be his light. So he's saying to multiply his light in this world. So we're meant to be like him and show people that. You know, one of my favorite movies is Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade. And there's this scene in it when they finally get to the Holy Grail, and there's this knight there who's been there for who knows how long time. And he's talking to Indiana, and he says to him, like, why do you seek the cup of Christ? Do you seek it for your glory or for his? And that's interesting to me, because it's like, well, what do you seek your life for? Do you seek it to glorify yourself, or do you do it for him? And when we're willing to bring that glory to him, then we're willing to expose his love to other people. And you know, it's interesting because there was a time when I was just walking around outside one evening and just kind of enjoying the cool of the evening, and I just started talking to God, and I was talking about him with different things. One of the things I asked him is, what does it mean to bring glory to your name? Because I think a lot of us, especially a lot of worldly people who don't follow Christianity, think that God is all about like being a glory hog. Like, for instance, thinking like, hey everybody, look at me. But when I was asking him, what he actually showed me is that glory has a number of definitions, and one of those is light. When he said bring glory to his name, what he showed me was shed light on who I am. What he's basically essentially saying is reveal me to the world. Show who I am to people. And part of showing who he is to people is being like him, because the world is not like him. But when you start to live like he does, people are going to start to see something different that they don't see every day. Because a lot of people are selfish. A lot of people are caught up in their own things, which to a degree is understandable, because life is crazier than ever now. You know, a lot of people say technology makes things easier. It does, but at the same time, I think that it makes things more complex, because we get caught up in social media, we get caught up in what people think, we get caught up in what people think you should look like, what you should sound like, what you should dress like, and it complicates life. But that's the thing, is that he's saying, show the world who I am, and part of that is being like him. A lot of people say that you can't be perfect, nobody's perfect. I've heard that, oh, I'm only human. But Jesus said, be perfect just as my Father is perfect in heaven. Now, does that mean that you're not allowed to goof up sometimes? Well, sure you are. That's why grace is there. Grace is there because it's your net. It's your safety net to catch you. Because God says, I know you're going to fall sometimes, but I'm going to be right here to pick you back up. And we're supposed to expose who he is. You know, I didn't put this in my notes, but I actually recently downloaded a Strong's Concordance app. And it's actually really cool, because you go into it and it shows you all the meanings that stand behind certain words. And even like when words are used in a different context, then it will have a different meaning and a different sound to it. And one of the cool things about that is I actually came across, you know, I was in the King James Version. It said faileth was one of the words, or fail. And I actually read it, and one of the descriptions said to fall. And so it was like in a literal sense to fall, or in a hypothetical sense, or symbolic. And so I was like, you know what? I bet that forgiven means to raise up. And I was right, it does. One of the things that forgiven means, or to forgive means to pick back up. And I've used this analogy before, but now that I've read it, it's really cool, because it's a literal sense. It's like he's the Father, and you're like the kid walking across the floor, and he's saying, come on, I'm encouraging you. And you fall. He's not over there yelling at you like, come on, are you serious? He's like, it's okay, I'm going to come over, I'm going to get you back up. Just keep coming forward. It's a literal sense, like he's really like that. He's not like in a screaming match. He's not aggravated. Love is patient and kind. And God is love. And God is patient. And God is kind. So he's not there trying to jump on your case. He longs for you. And that's the thing, is we find fulfillment in the arms of the Savior. Another thing that comes along with this whole thing is that Jesus knew he was a son. He was the Son of God. And there's like this whole set of things that follow along with that. Yet he had the heart of a servant. And a lot of the times when we think about that, there's a verse where Jesus says to his disciples, I don't call you servants because servants don't know everything that the master is doing, so I call you friends. I don't think that means that he's saying that it's not okay to be like a servant, but he's saying realize who you are and your identity. But Jesus had the heart of a servant because he didn't come to be served, but he came to serve. And likewise, he sent us to do the same. He washed his disciples' feet. And a servant actually has an interesting meaning behind it. I'm going to pull out my concordance here real quick. I think that I know what it says already, but just for the sake of not goofing up with it, I'm just going to go ahead and read this quick description here. But in the concordance, this version of servant is doulos, and it says a slave, a bondman, a man of servile condition. But it also says, in another sense, because there's multiple meanings, it says one who gives himself up to another's will. So what I like about that is it's saying that rather than being stuck on your own life, you're giving up your life and saying, I'm putting my will into your hands, Lord, because I want your will to be mine. Jesus even said this in the Garden of Gethsemane the night that he was betrayed. He said, not my will be done, but yours. Because even though there was a part of him that wanted to continue to stay with his disciples, there was a part of him who didn't want to go through the punishment and all this stuff. He knew that God's will was greater than that, and that this is the whole reason he came. And so he put his emotions aside, he put his feelings aside, and he said, your will be done. And when we put Jesus first, when we take upon his yoke, we're able to follow after the things he does, and it's not always easy in that sense. But to follow Jesus is to give up all the things that we stress out about. Let me see where I'm coming with this, because I've got good points I'm coming to. There's this really cool song by Leland called Opposite Way. And what I really like about it is it's talking about how so many of us do what everyone else is doing. And it says that my Jesus ran the opposite way. Because he says it's not not your will for me to stay. Your will for me is the opposite way. And what basically I'm getting at with that is it's really easy to want to just do what everyone else is doing. It's even humanly, it's normal to be that way. And for instance, if someone treats you wrong, well, the natural response for us is to get back at them or to be angry with them. But Jesus said to love your enemies and bless those who persecute you, and to pray for those who are spiteful and use you. And that's the opposite of what the world does. There's a funny Seinfeld episode where George, he's one of these characters and he's pretty selfish. They're all pretty selfish. But there's one day where he decides that, he's like, everything I do just goes bad. Everything I do goes bad. So you know what, I'm just going to start doing everything the opposite of what I do and see what happens. And he experiments with it and things start going better. And then pretty soon everything is going really good and then he's loving it. Now, there's still selfishness in that episode, so I'm not really trying to veer towards that. But the funny idea of that is so many times it's easy for us, for instance, like that, to have someone treating us badly and to be angry with them and just to continue to walk around. It's like you got steam coming out of your ears. I'm just upset with them and I'm not okay with this. And you start talking behind their backs and you do all this stuff. I've been dealing with a number of these things recently here myself, but then I see that I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to be that way because that's not what you've called me to be, God. And I decided to do the right thing in spite of it. And things always go so much better. Even if the other person doesn't respond back with love and doesn't see it, I feel better because I did the right thing in the situation, because I decided to love regardless of it. Jesus said go the extra mile. That's actually where that term came from. There's a lot of things in the Bible that are coined terms that we don't really get until we go back and read and we're like, oh, that's where that came from. And one of the things is that a Roman could actually commanded you to carry his bag like a mile. So when he said go the extra mile, he's saying take the extra effort and go even further with it. And so that's kind of where I'm coming at with this is I know that we did this on Sunday, talking about Corinthians, and I'm not going to ask you to flip there, so I'm just going to elaborate over it just a little bit, but I'm not going to go too far with it. It's like, let love be your highest goal. When we love, we shine that light because we're called to be His light. And that's what being like God is about. That's what being perfect is like, is doing what's right in spite of the way you feel and what's wrong that's happening in the world. And there's a lot of power behind that. David was describing with the whole thing about the clanging cymbal and the gong and all that stuff in a way talking about music without words and stuff. That's a good way to put it. I want to show you a different way that I interpret it though, and I don't think David's wrong, but this is my interpretation. It's like this. Hey everybody, look at me, look what I did. Ain't I awesome? Isn't that great? That's what the noisy gong means. It means you did it to get attention. You didn't do it for the right reasons. And he says, let love be your highest goal. He says that I could be burned at a stake as a martyr, or I could give all that I have to the poor, but if I didn't love, I'd have nothing. Because God is love, and if you don't have love, you don't know God. And so when we're like that, when we don't have that love, all we're doing is we're putting on a show for people. It's just like when Jesus compared the tax collector to the Pharisee. He said that the Pharisee prayed in front of everybody to get attention, and he said he already got his reward. Because his reward was, look at me everybody, and people looked at him. And that doesn't mean anything. That's meaningless. If Solomon wants to give a definition to something, that's meaningless. Doesn't matter what you do if you don't love. God actually showed me something really cool here recently, and I'm almost finished, just so in case you're wondering about that. But I had a really cool experience here recently. I've been dealing with some stressful situations in the home. That's not to say that I don't love those people, but sometimes we kind of clash. That's okay. Families do that. Sometimes it gets a little excessive, but that's okay. I was having some difficulties with that. And some things happened. I started getting accused of some things that were totally ridiculous. And so at first I was like, what am I supposed to respond within this situation? Because I was sitting down and I was looking at my phone at the text and I was like, this is ridiculous. Where does this all come from? This is days of our lives right here. And I'm looking at the text, and so I replied with the honest truth. I didn't get aggressive about it. Got another text back that it was in one ear, out the other. So I just sent back another text that was very simple and got through with that. And so it was easy with that. So I got home and I decided, what, I'm not going to acknowledge those messages at all. I'm going to be around these people. I'm not going to be mean to them. I'm not going to acknowledge the conversation. If they want to bring it up, I'll deal with it the best I can, but this is not mine. It's not my monkey, not my circus. So I went into the house, and it was awkward for a few minutes, but then finally I just started talking to him, and I was like, hey, how's it going? And we just started kind of chatting about things that were going on. Everything de-escalated almost immediately. And then, one of them, she went out onto the porch, and she was hurt, and I could tell her back was hurt, and she was leaning over something. And so I came over, and I actually rubbed her back. Now, I'm not saying this to say, look at me everybody. I'm saying this to help you see what the Holy Spirit is doing in me, and what He wants to do in you. I could be easily mad at these people, but I decided not to. So I gave her a rub down, and it really helped. Now I went inside the house, and as I was in the house, just kind of thinking to myself, all of a sudden, I saw an image in my mind, a vision, and I saw Jesus. Now, everyone sees Jesus differently. I saw an actor that played one of them. I think it's okay to see an actor in your head as Jesus. I think the point is, what does He symbolize to you? So I saw a symbol of Him, and He was shaking His finger like this at me, but it wasn't like I'm disappointed. It was I saw what you did. And He was like that, and He said, let me show you a more excellent way. And I knew exactly what He meant, because right before Corinthians 13, that goes into the love chapter, Paul says this. He says, let me show you a more excellent way. And so what he was telling me is he was approving of what I did because I was letting love be my highest goal. I was letting love be my motivation and how I reacted to the situation, because I could have easily snapped back and I could have said a whole load of things. But you know what? Anger begets anger and hate begets hate. It wouldn't have led anywhere, and they wouldn't have listened to me, and I would have just been mad and brooding all day long. Instead, I decided to love. And by doing so, it de-escalated the situation. Did it change them? I don't really know. I hope maybe it did. Maybe they'll see this message and get what I'm trying to say, and that'll help. But the whole point is that love is patient and love is kind, and it keeps no records of wrongs, and it endures all things. And like Jesus said earlier before, outside of those things, while he was doing his ministry, like I said, he said, love those who spitefully use those, who try to use you. Because that's the way God is, you know. God gets taken advantage of all the time. I mean, you think that he can't, but in a sense, it's like people try to, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I mean, people are coming to him for things, but they don't want to come from him. They don't want to be him. They don't want to be like him. They just want stuff. And this is where I'm coming from, is we want to be like him. We don't want to just want things from him, but we want to be like him. If anything, I want his personality to be my personality. Whenever I see a Jesus movie, or I see something that symbolizes him, or I read the scriptures, there's not a lot of things that get me emotional, but when I read the stuff that he does and the things he says and how he handles things, it gets me emotional because I know it's the truth, and I love that truth. And that's also why, the tax collectors and prostitutes and sinners were attracted to him. You know, a lot of the church treats trying to win people over to Christianity like a football game or something. Like you're on a different team. Hey, come be on my team. I've got cookies. Or something like that. It's like, this isn't about a team thing. This is about, these are lost sons and daughters. They're lost brothers and sisters. And he loves them so much. And at one point in time in our lives, we were lost, and he saw us and had grace for us. And so it's important for us not to judge in that sense, because we're supposed to be willing to step out and love those people and reach for them. So God's amazing like that. Let me show you a more excellent way. Love. Like, not just fake love, but really love. And if you can't, Dave says fake it till you make it. In a sense, that's true. Try. And don't do it because you're like, okay, I'm just going to do it. Be like, you know what, I'm going to really try this because this is what I want. Not because I was told to do it, because I really want to do this. Even Paul said that it's like pouring hot coals, heaping hot coals over people, because it's like, if someone's continually mean to you and you're continually kind to them, there's going to be a point where they're going to say, wait, I've been being nasty to this person. Why is this person being good to me?